I'm going to call this the prayer of the saints. It's really about mystical prayer, but that is the prayer that the saints, the very holy, special friends of God, have. You see, in recent months, I've had occasion to study Padre Pio a little, and out of this has come some contact with mystical prayer. Mystical prayer is in one way perhaps the highest kind of prayer, the sort of entering into the divine by prayer. The Greek word mystikos is of course derived from mustes, which has something to do with initiation, penetration to the inner secrets. In classical Greco-Roman religion, only those who were initiated into the mysteries were allowed a certain secret knowledge of the cult of various gods. The secret was so fiercely protected that we still know very little about these cults. On the other hand, currently a mystery is anything I don't properly understand, like how a computer works. Thus, mysterious and mystic are different. The latter, mystic, is used only in a religious context. The concept is therefore related to revelation of the divine and closeness or intimacy with the divine. An important feature, therefore, is that it is not obtained by the usual method of sense perception and is a special gift granted by God. There's plenty of room for confusion. The 15 mysteries of the Holy Rosary are 15 different holy topics, not necessarily unintelligible, whereas to call the Holy Eucharist a mystery means that I don't fully understand it, either because I don't understand how it is effected, or that I don't know in what sense the is meant when I say that Christ is fully present. Is, in what way is he present? To select one sense, I would say that the prayer of a mystic is a special prayer, a mystical prayer granted only to those who have a specially close link with the Lord. I begin by looking at two New Testament examples. The most obvious is Paul's own disguised account of his visit to the third heaven in 2 Corinthians 12:3. I don't know what this man, whether in the body or separate from the body, I know not, God knows, was caught up into paradise and heard unspoken words that no human being can speak. The Greek expression ereta could mean unspoken or unspeakable. Unspoken, not at all, or unspeakable, couldn't be spoken. The latter makes more sense, so that Paul is claiming he was given an understanding of things which couldn't be put into words, an experience of the unspeakable, presumably of things divine, which couldn't be put into words. Presumably Paul is here speaking of the understanding of heavenly mysteries, the foundation of all the teachings which he pours out in his letters, as well as in his spoken teaching. For a second example, I choose the Transfiguration. I think the Synoptic Gospels and the scene of the Transfiguration doesn't occur in John. The Synoptic Gospels are trying to represent a direct experience on the Holy Mountain of the divinity of Jesus, using terms familiar from the Old Testament. It's remarkable that Peter is so frightened that he can't think straight. This is the awe of the divine. In the Old Testament, one might add such scenes as the vocation vision of Isaiah in Isaiah 6, with its triple holy, holy, holy. And Isaiah is bowled over by the sense of his own unworthiness and the impurity of the people among whom he lives. Two examples in the early church are instructive, both stressing the joy of the experience of God. Cashin, in his 10th conference on prayer, eventually comes to a description of pure prayer, which cannot be taught, but only experienced, not dependent on any word or concept. He calls it a visit of the Holy Spirit, a sudden illumination bringing ineffable joy of heart, or a fiery outbreak, an indescribable exaltation, an insatiable thrust of the soul, free of what is sensed and seen. I would say that there are three important elements here: the special presence of the Holy Spirit, the joy, and the indescribability, three features of mystical prayer. A more descriptive passage is given by the great Augustine in that wonderful scene of his last meeting at Ostia with Monica, his mother, before she died. Augustine mentions a kind of lightning flash, if it may be so termed, of life eternal. He says, "We lifted ourselves in longing yet more ardent towards that which is, and step by step we traversed all bodily creatures and heaven itself, which sun and moon and stars shed their light upon earth. Higher still we mounted by inward thought and wandering discourse on your works, and we arrived at the summit of our own minds, and this we transcended to reach and to touch that land of never-failing plenty, where you pasture Israel forever with the food of truth." And as we talked and panted for it, we just touched the edge of it by the utmost leap of our hearts. Then, sighing and unsatisfied, we left the first fruits of our spirit captive there, and returned to the noise of articulate speech, where a word has beginning and end. That's in the 9th book of the Confessions. Here I would say that the principal elements are the intense joy and the sense of privileged access to a fuller knowledge than is usually attained. An unusual element is that it is shared by mother and son, not one individual but two. Linked to this joy is often another element, ecstasy. What is ecstasy? The ecstatic seems to be beyond the reach of ordinary life. A delightful story comes from the fathers of the desert and goes like this. At one time, Zachary went to his abbot Sylvanus and found him in an ecstasy, and his hands were stretched out to heaven. And when he saw him thus, he closed the door and went away. And coming back about the 6th hour and the 9th, he found him even so. But at the 10th hour he knocked, and coming in found him lying quiet, and said to him, "What ailed you today, Father?" And Sylvanus said, "I was ill, my son." But the young man held his feet, saying, I suppose it's sort of pinioning. The young man held his feet, saying, "I shall not let you go until you tell me what you've seen." The old man answered him, "I was caught up into heaven, and I saw the glory of God." According to his friend Padre Agostino, Padre Pio also, at one period of his life, would go into ecstasy for 30 or 45 minutes several times a day, at which times the uninstructed were alarmed that he seemed to be inaccessible to ordinary sense impressions, and even seemed to be dead. Though those who knew him well, for instance Padre Pannullo, his patron, were not at all fazed by this. Thomas Aquinas, compares it to the loss of normal consciousness in a paroxysm of anger or of love, in which the normal consciousness is blotted out. A very ordinary friend of mine, a tough Yorkshireman, described to me one such unique experience after communion, when he seemed entirely wrapped up in the Lord, so that nothing else mattered. Here I would focus on the lack of control by the subject, as in the extremes of anger or of love, to which Aquinas compares it. It's striking that Teresa of Avila divorces this sort of ecstasy from all conceptual or intellectual knowledge. The experience is of the arreta, the unspeakable, which can't be put into words. The same is true of the extreme emotions of anger and love. They're beyond the rational. Teresa writes, "I fell into deep ecstasy. It seemed to me that my soul wanted to leave my body. Already my soul, losing itself in the ecstasy, lost also vision of the eyes. My soul came to rest. With joy came repose, and I remained in ecstasy." When the soul has visions or hears words of this kind, it is never, in my opinion, at that time, when it is united to God in ecstasy. For at that time, its powers are totally absorbed in God, and it can neither see, nor hear, nor listen. A lovely description of the joy of such prayer is given by the medieval English mystic Richard Rolle, on the occasion when he felt in all reality the fire of eternal love. Richard Rolle writes, "I was sitting in a certain chapel, and while taking pleasure in the delight of some prayer or meditation, I suddenly felt within me an unwonted and pleasant fire. When I had long doubted whence it came, I learned by experience that it came from the Creator and not from some creature. Since I found it ever more pleasing and full of heat. Now from the beginning of that fiery warmth, inestimably sweet, till the infusion of the heavenly spiritual harmony, the song of eternal praise, and the sweetness of the unheard melody, which can be heard and experienced only by the one who has experienced it, and must be purified and separated from the earth. I perceived within me, I know not how, a melody and delightful harmony from heaven, which abode in my mind. For my thought was straightway changed into song, and even when praying, I gave forth the self-same sound in the presence of my Maker alone. Wonder seized me in that I was taken up into such joy, and that God should have given me gifts which I knew not how to ask for, and had not thought that even the most holy would receive in this life." The strangest thing of all is that the immense joy seems often to be linked with pain. Joy is perhaps the predominant feature, but there's also a sort of agonizing pain. Padre Pio described it as joy to Padre Agostino, his friend. "It seemed," he says, "as if an invisible force was immersing my whole being into fire. My God, what fire, what sweetness! I felt many of those transports of love, and for some time I remained as if out of this world." Or again, in his own words, "Oh Jesus, another thing, I love you very much. I want to be all yours. Don't you see that I'm burning for you? You ask love from me. See, I love you. Let us tarry together. Let us tarry alone." Then Teresa of Avila gives a striking description of the union of love and pain. She says, "Either in this life the fires of divine love will consume the rust of our sin and give charity to our souls, or after this the fire of purgatory shall torture our souls. O good Jesus, scourge me here, pierce me here, strike me here, burn me here, that in the future I may have no evil, but may feel your love here and forever. It pleased the Lord that I should sometimes see the following vision. I would see beside me on my left hand an angel in bodily form, a type of vision I was not in the habit of seeing. In his hand I saw a long golden spear, and at the end of the iron tip I seemed to see a point of fire. With this he seemed to pierce my heart several times, so that it penetrated my entrails. When he drew it out, I thought he was drawing them out with it, and he left me completely afire with the great love of God. The pain was so sharp that it made me utter several groans, and so excessive was the sweetness caused by the intense pain that one could never wish to lose it, nor will one's soul be content with anything less than God. It is not bodily pain, but spiritual, though the body has a share in it, indeed a great share. So sweet are the colloquies of love which pass between the soul and God, that if anyone lies, if anyone thinks I'm lying, I beseech God in his goodness to give him the same experience. This desire to share the passion of Christ reaches its extreme form, of course, in the stigmata, such as it was granted to Francis of Assisi and to the other Friar Padre Pio. This must be seen as an expression of the desire to be assimilated to Jesus at the moment of his greatest and most extreme love for humanity, a desire to join him in his passion and to share his sorrow for the offence to his Father, which is sin. This element of suffering, and particularly of sharing the passion of Christ, is a feature of Julian of Norwich in about 1400. She was an anchoress who shut herself up with very strict and minimal possibility of visiting, shut herself up in an annex to one of the churches in Norwich, which can still be seen. She had a strong sense of sharing the passion of Christ, and in two ways. Firstly, she had a severe illness, and to everyone, including her mother, seemed to be at the point of death. The parish priest was summoned and brought a cross. Looking upon it, she says, "Suddenly I saw the red blood trickling down, like drops of water, that the eaves of a house after a great shower of rain, and for rounds they were like the scale of herring," what that means. Secondly, she made 3 serious requests of the Lord. Firstly, a bodily sight of the passion of Christ, that she might share his sufferings. Secondly, to have a serious sickness, including the pains of imminent death, that she might be purified from the love of all earthly things. And the third request, 3 wounds of sorrow for sin, that she might share Christ's suffering. This feature of Julian's revelation of divine love is that the devotion to the passion alternates with the certainty and bliss of love. She writes, "After this, he showed a most excellent spiritual pleasure in my soul. I was completely filled with everlasting certainty, powerfully sustained without any painful fear. This feeling was so joyful and so spiritual that I was wholly in peace, at ease and in repose, and there is a portion of his passion near his death. I saw his sweet face, and it was dry and bloodless with pale dying and deathly ashen. And after that, more pale, grievous, distressing, and then turned still more lifeless into blue, and after that more dark blue, as the flesh changed into more profound death." Such is the experience of the love of Jesus in his passion. It is perhaps the highest form of mystical prayer.